happening in nature because the planet's getting older or whatever like that? Or is it really human activity that's modifying what's happening, making these changes?
Well, these are measures of carbon dioxide that are made out on a mountaintop in Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific. And you can see there has been a steady increase in carbon dioxide, and the average line is laid over top of a line that goes up and down that represents the seasonal changes in carbon dioxide that's driven by the growth of plants, and then the winter they die off, and that natural cycle. And this is a very good indication that there are things going on worldwide that are producing enough carbon dioxide to cause its level to increase above what you would expect. And it's being reflected in Hawaii, out in the middle, in the middle of the Pacific.
One other important point is that the highest number on this graph is not as high as where we are now. If you go off here,
the people out there don't know what graph you're talking about.
I'm sorry, the previous graph. This graph, the highest number here is 300, but we're already up 380. And that's just at the very, 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 very end. So we're higher than it's been.
Our questions are going to come all out of order now, but because I want to cover some of the questions here too. But I'm just curious, what countries on the planet are the most interested in pursuing, finding out about the global warming, the greenhouse effect, and everything, and doing something about it?
Probably European nations. It has been pretty much the national policy of this country for the last 6 or so years to ignore it. And the European countries and Japan have a much stronger interest in quantitating it and beginning to attempt to find out how can we reduce the very large carbon dioxide production without totally messing up our lifestyle, our industrial productivity, and it's not something that can be done next week.
Do you think the Europeans have a better concept of making sacrifices?
Well, I think they have a better concept in this case of seeing where a true danger lies and then acting on it. It's not a sacrifice if you're standing, say, at the edge of a cliff and somebody says, will you please take one step back so that you won't fall over it? I don't view that as a sacrifice. I view that as good advice and would thank the person for it.
Well, I'm thinking the Europeans, of course, they have a smaller area of land, but they have smaller cars and they don't use as much gasoline as we do and that type of thing. And sometimes I think that maybe we don't want to make those sacrifices, even with the rise in prices of gasoline the past few months. Really haven't seen people, according to the research, really cut back on the amount of time and when they're using their cars and so forth. Anyway, we want to get all this in, and we have 10 minutes left. But let's talk about the greenhouse effect and what that means.
Well, the greenhouse effect is fairly complicated, and to do it in 90 seconds.
Don't do it in 10 minutes anyway.
But anyhow, you have a great deal of energy pouring into the Earth from the sun. And as that energy goes through the atmosphere, arrives at the surface of the Earth, and is reflected back off and bounces back up towards outer space, a lot of things can happen to it. Some of it can be absorbed by carbon dioxide and methane, and that heats the atmosphere. Some of it is absorbed on the surface of the Earth. If you have something like the Arctic ice cap, which is like a mirror, that reflects a great deal of it back off. If you have a lot of aerosol debris, say from a volcanic eruption circulating very high up in the atmosphere, that reflects it back out before it comes back in. Now, the sum total of all this absorption, reflection, bouncing around and everything has led over many years for an average surface temperature of the Earth of around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, about 15 degrees centigrade. Now, as you change this mix of, say, at least a dozen different things, the Earth can get colder or the Earth can get warmer. And the argument is right now we're changing it, forcing it, largely through very large emissions of carbon dioxide. And that is leading to a change in balance, which is leading to a gradual warming of the Earth. Now, some people will say, well, it's gradual, why do I have to worry about it?
Yeah.
Well, it's going to precipitate things in the near future that are not gradual. Because if the entire Greenland ice cap melts and slips off of Greenland...
We've got a picture of that. Dorothy, can you hold that up while Carl is talking about that? Yeah. Talk about that, Carl.
This is Greenland in 1992. This is Greenland in...
Hold it for the camera, yeah.
Okay, which one?
Right there.
I think
Yeah, okay.
this one over here somewhere.
This is 1992. This is 10 years later in 2002. And this is only 3 years later in 2005. So this, and the white is ice. The green is where things actually grow on the coast of Greenland, and the red is bare rock that's being exposed. So the sunlight will bounce off the ice, but as the ice goes away, then it gets absorbed by the rock because the rock is dark, and so that causes this warming effect to increase. The warming causes more warming. So that's,
and then the ice goes into the water, and then the sea levels increase, right?
The ice is melting, and if once all of Greenland is melted, and you can see it's almost half gone now, then this is going to be all this water is added to the ocean, and this will bring up the level of the ocean, and for some countries will be heavily flooded, like Bangladesh, and some parts, for instance, the southern 1/3 of Florida could be flooded.
So we're talking about levels in the ocean all around the planet, not
All
just
around the
surrounding Greenland.
No.
Yeah.
And Greenland alone could account for 20 feet of rise in...
So according to this, Carl, in the next 10 years, what's going to happen in Greenland?
That's a great question, because if the ice is stable and it just melts like, say, an ice cube sitting in the bottom of your cocktail glass, it could take 100 years. If it becomes unstable, and there are indications that that's what's happening, as it melts, it builds up water underneath the ice sheet, and this becomes a lubricant. It becomes like a grease of sheet underneath of it. And it happened in Antarctica 2 years ago, I believe, where all of a sudden a huge piece of ice just one day slid off. And if that type of accelerated stuff takes place, then it's a very, very serious problem.
Yeah.
What can we do? We're all watching this and we're thinking, oh, this sounds terrible, and we don't want this to happen. We don't want our children to be alive or our grandchildren to be alive when this is going on. Is there anything that we can do to help the situation?
Well, fortunately, there are a whole list of things that we can do.
So it's not too late?
No, I don't think so. Conservation is the place to start, and you remarked earlier that Europe gets along very well with cars that get 40 miles to the gallon, whereas we tend to drive many cars that don't even get 20 miles to the gallon. And if we could reduce our consumption of carbon-based fuels dramatically, it would make a tremendous contribution to slowing this down.
And we just have to decide to do it.
Now, when we're talking about we, who are we talking about? The individual consumer, the government? Should we be pressing our legislators?
Both.
I mean, where's the advocacy movement here?
All of the above.
Okay.
You really, yeah, I think you really do need to talk to both the people you know and to write to your legislators and tell them that this is an important thing, and you want them to really work to pass legislation that will say, for instance, that the cars that are made have to be more energy efficient so the people can have a choice between energy efficient cars. And right now there aren't that many cars that are really energy efficient. So
I know my husband bought a Prius many years ago when they first
I
came
know
out.
there are some.
Yeah,
definitely.
he has a hybrid car. And do you have a hybrid car?
No.
Oh, oops,
Not
sorry.
yet, not yet, not yet. Well, but we're
But I know
driving
you have a
old
little one.
cars.
That
when
doesn't
they,
take
when
up
we,
that much
when they
gas.
hear of
She's
our
got a
next
lot of
one-
bumper stickers that say a lot of
hey,
good
I
things.
get 38 miles per gallon without having a hybrid car.
Will Detroit do anything about this? I mean, this
Not
is
unless
crazy.
it's
Why don't
pushed.
they do
If they're
something?
urged to, if
Huh?
people, if there's a market, if people buy more energy efficient cars, they'll make them.
Yeah, that's
And if government regulation pushes them in that direction. And the other thing is corn is smart enough to capture energy from the sun and turn it into essentially fuel. And I'm quite certain the scientific community in the U.S., if given the incentives, is smart enough to build good photovoltaic cells that will capture the same energy from the sun, turn it into electricity, and then use this electricity, say, to make hydrogen gas from water. And
And then will they figure out how the so-called utility company of the sun will be able to make some big profits?
well, the people that make very good photovoltaic cells and can market them around the world will make a great deal of
So
money.
this is a good thing to look into.
Yeah. And if you can then, say, take that electrical energy and generate hydrogen gas from water, then you have something that is a wonderful fuel and has no carbon in it at all. And you can then take that hydrogen gas and perhaps reduce carbon dioxide that's in the air to methanol. That's something you can burn in the gas tank of your car.
And are they working on this now, scientists around the country?
To some extent.
We're just not hearing as much about it as we'd like to,
Right.
even though there are articles in the Providence Journal once in a while.
Yeah, right.
But it could use a lot more focused.
So my next question was going to be education. I imagine education is the big thing here. We're starting with the students in the universities, maybe?
Absolutely. Well, I'd start with the students in elementary school. And they should be going home and saying, "Mommy, why isn't our house insulated better?"
Yeah.
Now, Dorothy, you teach, or you recently have been teaching at the University of Massachusetts, and you
Right.
teach in this field.
Yes, when I've taught all sorts of courses. I've done research, but I've also done mostly teaching, and I've taught general biology to non-scientists, or as you might say, biology for poets, and trying to at least get the students to understand that that everything is related, and that if you do things to plants, it's going to affect animals, and if you do things to plants and animals, it affects the climate.
Even
and
if it
affects
seems
us.
like an obscure animal is becoming extinct, we're all related, right?
Right.
And speaking of being related, we're coming to the end of the show, a nice little circle. But I really want to thank you so much. I know we didn't have that much time, but I think we got across a few important points. And I neglected to give your credentials at the beginning of the show, but we're talking here with an esteemed scientist who has a lot of background with a lot of experience, and both of them here. And we're so happy to have you both on the show and share this. And we hope that you'll go out and find out more about global warming, pressure your legislators, and try to do something. And if you want more information, you can just contact me, teawithmarie@cox.net. And thank you again so much for being on the show.
Thank
you for
you
asking us.
too.
It's very enjoyable.
And don't forget that in 17 years, as Al Gore says, we want to be able to speak to our grandchildren of the future and not have them be bitter with us because we didn't do anything to help save their planet. So I'm Marie Youngkin-Woolman saying goodbye. And don't forget to keep beauty in your lives every single day. And the beauty of the earth is probably one of the most important things. Thank you.